So before we kind of get started with everything, let me just get a real sense. Who here's heard of GitHub Copilot? And I guess for the people who didn't raise their hand, what rock have you been living under, right? Who here's actually used GitHub Copilot? All right, awesome. Like through the free version or through your company? Most company? Awesome. And I'm guessing you're here to hopefully get some tips on some of the different things that you can do in GitHub Copilot, maybe see something that you haven't seen before. Is that pretty spot on? All right, well, this is not the right place to be. So I've done this talk a few times, and typically what I've done is I've talked about the architecture of GitHub Copilot, what goes into it, and some of the feedback that I've got is we don't want marketing information about GitHub Copilot anymore. So can you do more demo? So what I'm hoping to do for this entire talk is just demo things in GitHub Copilot, in Visual Studio and VS Code. And if you want to see something, I could try to bring up a scenario. I have a couple of scenarios, but this is very much I want you folks to drive what you want to see. One, because we're a smaller group, so I can kind of hopefully answer some of your questions individually, but also I understand that especially around AI and generative AI and LLMs and all these sort of things, you get a lot of, this is how great it is, but you usually don't get to see okay, how do I actually use this in my day-to-day, other than, miscellaneous Microsoft Build video or miscellaneous tech celebrity showing exactly what they want to show. Is that fair? Is that good? All right. Are you going to be happy if I'm successful? All right. Cool. Awesome. So with that out of the way, my name is Isaac Levin. If you haven't had the opportunity to come across my musings or ramblings on the internet, you can find them in a bunch of different places. I have websites and socials and all that stuff up here. I also host a podcast called Coffee and Open Source, which I talk to people all across the tech landscape about what they find interesting about tech. I've been doing it for 3 years. I've had some amazing guests. I've had folks like Scott Hanselman and Kelsey Hightower, Chris Nova, so on and so forth. I've had founders of Kubernetes on my show. And I just enjoy talking with people about tech. So if you like that sort of thing in a podcast form, or I stream the videos too, but you can find that all at coffeeandopensource.com. So with that out of the way, that is the only slide you're going to see. Can I get a round of applause for that? So now I can tell everybody, hey, they were clapping at my talk, so I did good. So who here, so I imagine all you folks are .NET developers, right? Or think of yourself as .NET developers, even though you're forced to do Angular stuff every now and then. Who here uses Visual Studio primarily for .NET? And then you two are VS Code? Writer. Sure, yes. Who uses non-Visual Studio for .NET development? Writer, VS Code, VS for Mac, rest in peace. All right, sweet. So I'll show a little bit of both. Most of it's going to be in Visual Studio, just to be completely honest. But if there are things if you have a question about, oh, can I do this in VS Code too? Just raise your hand, interrupt me, yell at me, whatever, and we'll have a discussion about it. So the first thing that I want to talk about a little bit is the ongoing developer experience for bringing in a developer into a new project, right? So we've all been there. We've started a project, and we're asked maybe to fix a bug or add a feature or whatever, and the question really becomes very quickly okay, how do I learn this code base in a quick way? Otherwise, my life's not going to be that great. So I have a non-trivial .NET application that I built myself. It's called Presence Lite. Basically what it is, it's an application it's a Windows app. I'm converting it to Maui, so it'll run on Mac as well. But basically what it does is it takes your Microsoft Teams presence and it broadcasts them to smart lights. So LifeX, Philips Hue, Wiz, Yeelight, so those sort of lights. So you can have a light in front of your office that changes color depending on your team status. So it's nothing super crazy, but it's a non-trivial size app. What you see here is I'm remoted into a dev box. Side note, who here has heard of Microsoft DevBox? Basically what it is, think of it as it's a cloud-based VM that is substantially more high performant than the laptop I have. So like this one in particular is 8 CPUs and 32 gigs of RAM or whatever. So I'm just going to start Presence Light really quick and show you. Actually, let me open up Teams first because I need Teams to be able to do that. So while that's running, I'm going to start Presence Light. Okay. Just going to show you what it looks like, just to give you an idea of what we're going to do as we go through this. And hopefully it doesn't take forever to build, because I built it this morning. But basically what I want to do is I want to just kind of go through a couple of the, like, I guess you can say, like, top-level GitHub Copilot features that exist and how we can use them to learn a code base and eventually contribute to that code base. So long and short of it here, this is the app, right? So it shows my name, it shows my face, and it shows like what my status is. So like if I go in here and I change my status to like busy, this will update in a second and it'll be red, right? So nothing crazy, but this also, like, you can configure it for individual lights, right? So that's kind of the point of Presence Light. So what I want to be able to do is I want to learn more about this project. So if I go over here to Solution Explorer, I have a handful of different projects, right? I have like just a class library. I have a Razor Components library because it uses Razor Components to house all the UI, because there's a web version as well as a version that's for WPF, and eventually there'll be one for MAUI. And then there's obviously like the client version. So that's the desktop app, that's the web app, and then I have a packaging app because you need that for WPF. So let's just talk about the couple of ways that you can interact with GitHub Copilot. So there are two primary ways. There is what we like to call code completion, or you type and it gives you a recommendation. Whether that recommendation is accurate or not it's yet to be determined sometimes. And then there's chat, right? So let's talk a little bit first about the inline completion part. So what I do when I'm new to a code base and I need to write something, let's just go to this class right here and scroll down. You could do something as simple as put in some comments and then say, call the authenticate method from the login service, and then if you tap here, hopefully GitHub Copilot will actually show you a completion. I guess it doesn't in this particular case. That's exciting. So let's just try something else. Create a conditional that checks if login service is initialized, right? And what this will do, and then if not, it'll give you some more information, and then you can tab through, and then it'll give you that, and then that. And this isn't super helpful, right? But eventually it gets you to something like that, right? Who here has done stuff like that, where they do use comment for prompt engineering, right? Yeah. So that's one of the one things that I definitely recommend folks that are new to GitHub Copilot is use comments like you would use for prompts. Because we talk about prompts a lot where it's, hey, ask GitHub Copilot a question, and then it'll give me some result. But if you have a conversation with it, it'll actually make your life a bit easier. Completely funny side note, my kid, who's 8, wants to learn Python because they want to build Minecraft mods, right? So we started to learn Python, and Dad isn't teaching them Python. GitHub Copilot is teaching them Python. So they put in a comment, I want to do this, and then it shows them, and then they ask, and then they'll just continue to type through, and then I show them Copilot chat, where they can have a conversation with it. But basically it boils down to my kid like creating small little apps where it's like ask for Dad's credit card number, and then it prints out that credit card number, and all that sort of fun stuff. But anyway, GitHub Copilot, at least to my opinion, is a great way to kind of learn how to build like new types of programs, new types of applications with that sort of stuff. So that's like inline chat. So that's pretty self-explanatory. You can, as you type, it auto-completes for you. The more interesting thing is chat itself. So you can do something like this. So I can go over. I'm going to move this a little bit away from my face. So you can do something, you can go here, and then you can use Alt/, which is the short command for bringing up Copilot chat. And I imagine most of you folks that are GitHub Copilot experts, probably more than me, you probably know there's like tons of commands that you can do with GitHub Copilot, right? Do you know what those commands are? Some of them are? Somewhat? So you could do something like explain. Just say that. And GitHub Copilot will actually start to go through your code in a particular section, and it'll explain it for you. The selected code represents a class wrapper, blah, blah, blah. Let's go through the code step by step. And it will show you all the ways that works, right? And then if you scroll the way down, you can say continue in chat window. And this is really where GitHub Copilot is very interesting, because you can have like this chat bot interactive experience. So in this particular case, like overall the class wrapper encapsulates the functionality to interact with the Graph API. Well, what if you ask it, so this is an interesting thing. So who here stops, when they use GitHub Copilot, they stop at this level. They ask a simple question, they get the answer they want, or they don't, and then they close the window. So who here raised their hand? Yeah? Follow up. Who continues the conversation from here? Raise your hand. What is the next, so just somebody shout out, what's the next question that you might ask in this particular case? Because what it did is it just kind of summarized the entire class. Maybe you could do something like, how can I add retry policy to this class? If I spell class right. So it'll give you an answer, right? And it'll give you a bunch of code. We've all seen this, right? And sometimes this code is helpful, sometimes it's not helpful. But at the end of the day, it gives you information. How about something that includes a third-party library? So this will do is it'll actually start to recommend different approaches, right? So in this case, it's going to recommend Poly, I think is what it actually recommended, which is funny because I'm already using Poly in this project. The number one thing that I want to call out about GitHub Copilot is that it is not intelligent, right? All it does is have a lot of context, the context of your code base, the context of all of the things that the model's been trained on, and it answers your question. It may or may not recommend solutions that you've already implemented, right? So it's important to ground it. So you can then say, was this helpful? No, it wasn't helpful. And you can say something like, tell us more, and you can give it feedback as to, well, you recommended code that already exists in my project, or what have you. And this is super impactful because what this actually does is it helps teach the model how to have a conversation with you. Because at the end of the day, like, this isn't something where you, hey, write me a class that does this and all of this, and you copy and paste that code blindly and you go about your day. You definitely can do that in some cases, but in general, we as developers, we're the experts of this code base, or at least we like to think we're the experts of this code base, right? So let the AI do what it's supposed to do and help augment your ability as a developer. Because I think the last thing that we want is to just blindly assume that this code that it gives you, or these recommendations that it gives you, is what we actually want to do. So that's something like explain. And there's tons of other commands. So like, for instance, this, let's just do here, and I can go back, alt that, and I can just do something like, if I put slash, I can add documentation for a particular function, right? Who here, when they first write like a class or they write a method, after they write, the immediate thing they do is they completely document and comment it. Not one person's raising their hand. None of you document anything. Here's a question. When you document things, do you document it typically in English or in Swedish? English, yeah. Is that just because if you don't use English, like the Americans that you work with will never ever understand what's going on? Yeah. Yeah, sort of. Anyway, tangent over. But you can actually have Copilot start to write code. Like, for instance, in this case, this is a silly example because all it really does is add like doc effects stuff to that. But if you had like a more, let's just say doc, the methods to show step by step what each method is doing. Do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea? We'll see, right? So when you do this, it's going to hopefully follow your instruction. It's going to not just give you like high-level definitions of what the program is doing, but it adds substantially more code. Oh, it didn't actually put in stuff in line, which I was expecting it to. But that's the beauty of these sort of things. Sometimes it just doesn't do what you expect it to do. So you can then do like another Ask Copilot. Let's just do fix. So you can fix it, you can optimize, or you can do something that I like, which is create tests, right? So create a test for this class and reference. Then you use the pound sign, and you can actually specify, give it more context. So right now it only has the context of the thing that's open. You can then say, hey, pound sign, maybe do something else. And then you can specify actual lines of code, an entire class of itself, other classes and other projects. So let's just do that. I'm going to say create reference for that. And then what we'll do is it'll actually create a class for us. And why is this valuable? Because who here, to follow up the documentation conversation, after you write a method or a class, the first thing you do is you document it, right? We've already determined that. The second thing you do is write unit tests, right? Who here does that? Sometimes. Do you have like KPIs where it's like you have to write test case for every single? No. Nobody does that. That used to be a thing. I used to be a consultant, and there was like a part of like every project was like you have to write X amount of unit tests per project, which is kind of hilarious. But anyway, so we have here, what it actually does, it creates a new class for us. It creates this main window tests. So what it does is actually it takes a class that I referenced, and then it starts to build out an entire test class for that particular thing. And I can actually scroll through here and see what it's actually doing. Non-trivial, right? So let's just scroll down. How many lines did it generate? I scrolled. Let's just actually use a mouse instead of trying to do that. So it's a lot of code, right? 400 lines of code. And obviously, because I trust GitHub Copilot to do every single thing, I'm just going to copy and paste that and not even look at it, right? People are nodding their head. The answer is no, I'm not supposed to be doing that. I know it's so easy, but come on. All right. So, and I can continue on and do other things as well. So, another thing that is interesting is, let's just go here and close out of that. So I'm just going to go to just an arbitrary method, and this is called get profile and presence. So here's something that you might not know. So we've talked at this point about like GitHub Copilot interacting with your code base, right? But GitHub Copilot does some also interesting things too, not just around like recommending code or recommending approaches. It actually can do things like help you do things like refactoring. So for instance, I can go to rename here, and then, do I have to zoom it? There we go. Has anybody ever seen that little star sign before? Yeah? Right? What does that star sign usually mean? This is AI, right? Like, oh, here we go. I have some sparklies in my application now. So I can actually click this, and it'll recommend renaming, like different opportunities for me to rename. So in this particular case, it's not, so I can change it to get user profile and presence or fetch, and it'll update all these references and include comments, include strings, right? So if you're new about this, show-offs. But honestly, it's one of those things where you can make your life a little bit easier by taking advantage of some of the things that are built into Visual Studio. So like for instance, let's just actually go through, and I'm going to write a new feature for this, or at least attempt to. So let's do this. So I'm going to go to View and open up GitHub Copilot Chat because I didn't remember what the hotkey was. I'm going to create a new one and say, I want to create a new feature to show the email address of the user in the UI. How would I do that? So here's a silly question for you. So who here is like nice to GitHub Copilot? Why are you nice to a computer? Stacy, why are you so nice to a computer? No, that's fair. That's fair. I thought the English people, for the most part, are very, very nice. But I think what's interesting to me is it is an AI, right? So like, but I don't know. I don't who here is like seen like that Scott Hanselman video where he's like, you need to be kind to the robots. Has anybody seen that? Yeah, a couple of people raising their hand, right? It is very funny that even though like you can be completely disrespectful to it, it really doesn't care. But like there's something intuitively in our mind that it's like if we ask nicely, maybe it'll actually do it right the first time. So if I click this, right, and it's going to give me a response, and it's going to give me a whole bunch of code. But let's just try something interesting. So I'm going to do this, and so it's going to give me a recommendation. It's going to say, okay, you're going to update this project, this class. You're going to update the reser page. You're going to do all these things. You can insert it into a new file. You can preview. So this was super helpful. Is there anything else I can do? Man, I can't type today. To make this more readable and testable. So what's going to happen, do you think? Do you think it's going to give me like a better response? Probably not. But one of the things that's very, very interesting is that it gives you more code and a unit test too, right? I could have probably been, hey, dumb AI, can you please like give me a test case? Okay, thanks. Or you could go through this path of being nice because in your brain, it probably helps you think that you'll be a bit more successful. Right, so let's just actually go through and start to look at some of these recommendations. To show the email address of the user in the UI, you need to follow these steps, right? So you're going to create a new user model. You're going to update the controller to include the class. You're going to update the user, whatever, right? This is wrong. Do you know how I know it's wrong? Because I know my code base better than GitHub Copilot does. What it's doing is it's recommending, hey, why don't you do all of these things that probably aren't super necessary? Like, I know that I don't need to go to the user controller. I know I don't need to do these things. So what I can then do is say, hey, Copilot, I'm going to be mean now. This is not accurate at all. This project uses the Microsoft Graph API to get user information. How would I update it to get email? Because what I really want, I know the answer to this question already, right? This is a very simple example because I already know what Copilot should be recommending to me, but I'm trying to see if I can coerce it to give me the right answer and give me code that's actually valuable. So here, it's still not quite accurate, right? So get user ID by async. Okay, that's good. Update that. Update that. It's still asking me to do a bunch of like nonsense. So let's just do this instead. So I know, so if I get profile, if I scroll down, at this point in time, get profile and presence, I have a user. So what I can do is I can look at this reference, go here, see where that's being referenced, and then I can just update this. So let me just see if I can find. I always get confused when I look at code that I wrote like 3 years ago. So give me 1 second to remember exactly what this is. So I can do something like this. I can go to the class library, and I can go down to services. Not there, Isaac. Stop flailing miserably. Index, right? So I know right here I have a mud text, like a little, mud blazer component. I just know that if I do something like this, if I just copy it, and then change this display name to mail, that gives me my answer. right? So Copilot didn't help me at all. And the reason why I went through that exercise to show you, sometimes if you think for 2 seconds, can the AI actually help me? The answer is no. But what it can do is it can do something interesting after that. So what I have here, let's just get rid of whatever that is. So I added this one small change, right? What is this? If I can actually, what's that? Yeah? Yeah, it's an awesome feature. But it's like sparklies, right? Exciting. But it's sparklies with a pencil, which means like even extra spicy, right? I imagine most of you folks have probably seen this, but like this is the number one value prop of GitHub Copilot to me. Like literally number one. Like if it just did this and nothing else, I'd be like, okay, we're cool, awesome. So it goes through all of my commits or all the things that I've staged, and it'll actually give me like a non-fix, right? Because who's guilty of that? Just like fix as a comment, yeah. Honest person. The rest of you are liars. But yeah. Oh yeah. It was like, do you remember when Visual Studio got that feature where you can do like pound sign inside the commit for like a user story or like a bug fix for Azure DevOps or for GitHub, and it would automatically like close that issue. And when that first came out, I was like, that's the greatest thing ever. And then I realized after using it for like a week, it's like, oh, it actually like closes stuff I don't want to close yet. That's probably not the best. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's great, but then you need to do your due diligence as a developer to make sure it's actually doing exactly what you want. So we went through a couple of different examples of, explain. We went through documentation generation. We went through test generation at a really, really high level. We went through the inline chat stuff. We went through some, features in Visual Studio that are kind of augmented by it. There's also, like, you can actually search in Visual Studio as well. I don't really have a good example off the top of my head, but you can actually search in Visual Studio using AI to find settings. Get this out of the way. Make this smaller. So you can do things. I don't remember. They moved it recently, so I don't remember exactly where it is. But there is. I think it's in options. I'm not gonna try. But like there is a place where it's like, how do I change the font size? I can actually do that in GitHub Copilot Chat. Actually, when I think about it, like let's just create a new window. This font is too small in Visual Studio. How can I make it bigger? So it's not just for your code, but it's also for your environment as well. So to walk you through step by step on how to do things. Because one of the things that I'm very, very, and I'll get to your question in a second, one of the things that I am always struggling with in Visual Studio, VS Code, is like how to find the option to do the thing. So if GitHub Copilot could actually walk me through step by step on how to do something like change the font size or update a setting in a launch profile or whatever without me having to like go out to the internet to get the answer, right? Because I think of this as just like a very sophisticated Google search where I don't lose context. You had a question? Why do I create a new chat all the time? Because I'm kind of lazy and like I don't like seeing text that I've typed previously. You can literally do it all in one chat. And actually that's for a lot of people that's actually recommended because it keeps that context. So that's a great point. Is the longer you have that window open and the longer you continue that conversation, the more grounded the AI becomes in that particular, because you're giving it more and more context. So to your point, if I just keep on creating new chats over and over and over again, it doesn't get any smarter. Yes? Yeah. That's so. I was trying to avoid talking about how Copilot works because a lot of people start to glaze over, but we can talk about it. Thanks for bringing it up. So how all of these things work is you give it data, and it gives you data back. And like the canonical way they use to kind of define that data is called tokens, right? Just at a really, really high level. So his question is like the bigger your chat window is the more tokens that are being sent back and forth. The answer is yes and no, because it doesn't need all of the tokens. What it does is it sends kind of deltas of what you're asking for, and then Visual Studio, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it coalesces that information. So it sends just enough context to get the information that you need, without it affecting like the overall like size of being what's sent across. So it's yes and no. Yes, the tokens are getting bigger, or the tokens are getting larger as the context increases, but it's not sending the entire thing up and down every single time. What I have seen, it's actually gotten a lot better, especially since we've gotten newer GPT models that kind of sits on top of GitHub Copilot. When it first came out, like if you had a large chat window, responses would take a long time to come back. But what I've noticed substantially is that it's substantially less. So there is something going on internally where it's not sending everything up and getting everything back down. Because you'll see that with like ChatGPT. If you use ChatGPT, sometimes ChatGPT will just freeze. And you're like, okay, do I just wait? Do I click the stop button and try again? Because what ChatGPT is doing is it's rebuilding all that context in there. So thanks for calling that out. Does anybody have any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's unrelated.
Okay.
It's about, have you used it to try to do maintaining tasks on code base rather than adding code? Because I feel like it's always focused on adding code,
Yeah.
right? So what about suggesting patterns or refactorings?
I did that a little bit with like the renaming, for sure. But yes, most definitely. Like what I could do, let me think if I can think of an example in this code base that I definitely need to refactor. There's lots of them. I'm trying to think of one that will actually be beneficial for you folks. I'm not going to try to think about one, but the short answer to your question is yes. So like you literally could go, hey, in this class, am I doing things the right way? Right? So like, let's just do that. Like, and because she called it out, I'm not going to open up a new window. Good, bad, or indifferent. Let's go here in Graph Wrapper. Is there anything I can do to this code? To make it more performant? Is that a good enough question for you, sir?
Let's try it.
Yeah? He's like, it's not that great. It's the nicest way of saying no.
I'm thinking of
Like refactoring entire code bases, right? Yes. Yeah. So what's great about the references is you can add multiple references too. Like right now I'm doing simple examples where I'm just doing # one class, but I could do # like an entire project or an entire solution, right? Here, let's just do that. How about present slate core? This is going to give me a lot of text back because it's an entire project, right? But it goes to show you that you can go through and you can actually take this out and split out all the individual tasks. I'm going to show you something very soon that might kind of get to where you're talking about. So obviously, what I've done a lot in the last 30 minutes is like put in a prompt and just like gloss over like 700 lines of text with what it's doing, because I've kind of gone through this talk enough times to have a decent understanding of what the AI is trying to do. So I'm glossing over a lot of it. So if that's some feedback for me, please let me know and I can adjust it for the next time I do it. Did you have a question or a comment in the back? Okay, cool. Yes.
Bullet number 3 here, remove unused packages. Can it identify which packages are unused? Because that is something I want.
What packages are not being used in this project. Oh, so it shows you how to do it in Visual Studio one by one. Yeah, it doesn't actually do that. And I bet you that you could coerce it to get you an answer. Like, look in all of the classes for this particular project and tell me which ones are not being referenced, and if they're being referenced, can you update the project file to. You could put in a prompt like that big, and more than likely it'll get closer to what you're looking for. But in this case, it's just recommending like tools to use to make your life a bit easier. All right, so that's like working on like a larger code base. I wanted to experiment with something. I don't know if I'm going to have enough time, so I'm going to try something. Did I just close the wrong window? Nope, I closed the right window. So let's try this, because I want to show you something cool at the very, very end. I just closed Visual Studio, or I moved it. There we go, open. So, like, if you're all .NET developers, you've all seen like the, .NET new web application like weather page, right? That people are nodding their heads, so yeah. I had an idea for a demo when GitHub Copilot first came out, and I went through it, and it didn't do really what I wanted, and we're still not 100% there, but I'm going to try to show you how like you can take something that isn't that exciting and make it a little bit more exciting. Because one of the things that I struggle with as a developer is I'm a .NET developer. So when things start to get down the path of like CSS and UI stylings, I really suck at it. Really, really poorly. I'm not very good at it. So if you've ever gone to this page, you'll know what I'm talking about in a second. And especially like if anybody here is like a UI expert, they probably see like that code and they're like, oh, that's really not how you, oh, there's errors here. That's crazy because I literally just created a new class yesterday. All right. Where view error list. Cool. There were build errors. You want to continue? Sure. Oh. No. No, I'm in hell. All right. Maybe we're not going to do the thing that I wanted to show you. All right. We're gonna completely bail on this, at least starting it. So let's just do this. Weather.razor is a razor component that shows static weather data. It uses an HTML table to display that data. So I'm giving it context, and that's the reason why I'm typing this out, is I'm giving it context. Otherwise, it will look at the file and it'll make its own assertions, which may or may not be what we want. How would I update this UI to use more modern CSS styling? For instance, FlexGrid. Because one of the things that I've always struggled with is like, okay, I can make tables. Like HTML tables are like I'm like so good at HTML tables. I'm like the best at HTML tables you've ever seen. However, like HTML tables suck, right? They really do. So what I've done a few times in my work is I've actually I've created an HTML table or some UI that I know how to make, and then I'll ask Copilot, hey, can you make this not look like shit? Sorry for the people that are listening to the recording of this. So what it'll actually do is it'll walk through and it creates a more div flex style approach. So I'm just going to take this. Actually, I'm not, because this project's not building, so whatever. I can't even show you if all this stuff is valuable. All right, so let's just assume that it looks glorious now. It looks so great. But it uses static data. That's kind of boring. It also uses static data. can I update the code to use live weather data? And this is why I think it's really cool, because it'll actually recommend, okay, so you're going to use this NuGet package, you're going to install this NuGet package, and then you're going to go through step by step and show me the code used to use the Open Weather API SDK, right? So what that does is it's pretty cool, because it walks me through taking an existing code base and modernizing it a bit more. I just got the 10-minute warning, so I wanted to show you something really, really cool, and then I'll have some time for questions. So we're going to dodge out of this. So the long and short is that in this, I was able to update my UI to something from not great looking table-based layouts to more modern idiomatic CSS approach. And then I was able to take that static weather data and update it to use the Open Weather API, which will give me real-time data from a particular area. So I have a question for you. Who here has used, where is, oh no, how do I get out of here? My little toolbar went away, so I have no idea how to get out of here now. Task manager. Yeah, that's how I got out of here. All right. So, who here has heard of GitHub Copilot workspaces? Okay. So think about it like this, right? So we've talked about a lot of interacting with the UI, with you driving the conversation. What if you could just give an idea to Copilot and it would do a lot of the work for you? Was that something that would be valuable? Let me show you an example of what I mean, right? So I'm going to open up that Presence Light project again. So I'm going to go here, and in here, I can go code, and I don't have zoom in on this one. I can go to Copilot, and I can provide a task. Maybe there's a user story that exists. Maybe there's a bug that needs to get fixed. I could do something like, do you remember that email example? How can I add or create a new feature to add the email of the user to the UI of Presence Light? I click Start Task. This takes me to a completely different window where it walks through the process of what it will take step by step to complete that particular task. So it's not in a GitHub Copilot chat window anymore. It is in the context of Copilot as a workspace. So what it'll actually do, you give it a task, it reads through your project, your GitHub repo, and then it creates what's called a specification. So these are all the things that will probably need to get done to update this particular project to do the same. So the current behavior, no, the email of the user is not currently displayed. This handles this. This handles this. You can provide additional context by adding additional items. It proposes a solution. So it says, now includes a property for storing the user's email, now extracts and returns it, blah, blah, blah. You can look at the references, so it'll actually tell you all of the different things, and it'll open up those references if you want to see them. And then you do this button, where you generate a plan. And what does generating a plan actually do? It scans all of your code. It puts together the recommendation of coding changes that will need to take place to provide the accurate or the answer to the task by the specification. So then you can go something like this. So you can go in here and look. You can add additional items here. You can do that. You can add additional files. You can add additional notes. You can look at the references still. But these are all the recommended change. So it's going to change these 4 files. You can then implement the selected, and then it will start to update all of the code that it's referencing and do all the tasks that is specified in that specification, the tasks. And I ran this earlier today, and it didn't take that long, but because it is parsing all of these lines of code and actually adding code in real time, it might take a little bit. But while this is doing it, I'm just generally curious, because we've talked a lot about leading the conversation with Copilot, right? Where you give it some context, you give it a question, it gives you a response, you respond back. what do you think of this approach? Where you would ask it to do something kind of arbitrary or somewhat broad, and then it does a lot of the due diligence and work for you. Like, I'm generally curious, like, what are your thoughts about this approach? You can provide additional context if needed and give it more direction, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So, like, to your question earlier, right? Maybe I want to refactor an entire solution. I could have created my task could have been, this code needs to be refactored to use HTTP client instead of web client, or some like taking an old legacy approach to doing something and then implementing that. It would go through all of your code and it would recommend, these are the things you need to do to complete your particular task, and these are the coding changes. Do you want to do them? You click yes, and it does them for you. And once that's actually done, so we can scroll it down here. So that one's done. This one is still working, and then it's got one more. After this is done, it's actually then going to say, do you want to create a pull request? You click on that button, it generates a pull request with like actual valuable commit details in there. And then you can review it and go through that entire process. So I'm curious, like that flow where I type a sentence in and then click a bunch of buttons and then have a PR with all the code that I want to update. Is that interesting, or is that terrifying, or you don't believe it? I'm genuinely curious. I don't have any dog in this fight. I'm just genuinely curious. Yeah, that's probably fair. What if it was like the best code? What if it was like better than the code you write? Oh, that's the good. That's a good. I was hoping for him to say something a bit more cheeky, like it's not better than my code. I guess that's the difference between an American thought process and a European thought process. But yeah, so like maybe I need to provide a bit more context and help teach the code to do things a bit differently. What is there anything else? What other thoughts you folks are thinking about? Yes.
I think I would use it to understand, maybe try to get an idea of the impact of what I want to do for
Mm-hmm.
the code base.
Yeah.
But I feel like Copilot coding kind of robs me from the thought process that I have to go
Mm-hmm.
through by typing things.
Sure. That's a good point, right? Like there's a lot of studying going on about like where is the critical mass of like you using your fingers to do something and actually typing out for each blah 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 versus a comment and then having the thing. Are you actually learning? Right? There's a lot of research going into that. Do you actually learn by telling a Copilot to do things? And I think the question is, yes, you learn how to get rid of the things you don't care about, right? Like the example I always use is like group by in Link. I've done it probably 10,000 times in my professional career, yet every single time I have to do it, I go to Google and I say, how do I do a group by in Link? Because I don't know how to do it. It's just one of those things that will never go into my brain, it'll never resonate. So I'm able to, instead of getting out of my flow, losing all of that thing that I'm doing at the moment, to go out to the internet, find the answer to my question, and then come back and be like, oh, what was I doing? Oh, that's right. So being able to stick in my particular flow is really helpful. But I see your point as, am I gaining any knowledge, especially coming to a new code base, am I gaining any knowledge by having the AI do a lot of the driving for me? So it's an interesting conversation. They're having lots of, there's lots of debates about whether or not this stuff is going to impact junior developers specifically, right? Because a lot of the original early marketing for this stuff is like, oh, it's like having a junior developer at your, inside your computer, when it's not 100% accurate. So it's done now. So it's recommended all these coding changes, right? And I can click create pull request and add a title. I can generate a description. I can create pull request. And it does it. I can then open that on GitHub. And it shows me that generated code, that commit. I can actually then go back in here into the session, the Copilot Workspace session, and go through that process. And I can review those coding changes that I actually made. So this is kind of like the new thing, right? Like this isn't available to a ton of people yet, but it allows you to, instead of thinking about walking through and having a conversation, you start off the task and then you have a conversation with it after it's done a lot of the work. So these are a couple of things that to think about. We're out of time. How you can use GitHub Copilot is daily to help you be a better developer. Some of the things that are coming in the future. I wanted to show something called GitHub Copilot Agents, which I didn't get to, but basically the idea of, we've done a lot of having conversations in the context of your code, but what if you brought in like Docker? Like, how can I take this project and Dockerize it and generate Docker files for me? Or using there's one for Microsoft Azure. How can I deploy this app to the cloud? Give me step-by-step instructions how to do that, and then a button to do it for you. So these are some of the things that are coming in the near future. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And if you have any questions, you can come up here. We can talk for a little bit, or you can meet me out in the hallway. But I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great rest of the conference, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for making time with me. So take care.